right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, a physique update from a guy that we haven't seen much from in a while, that being Rafael Brandao. Now, in my opinion, Rafael was one of the bigger names that we saw absent from the 2025 Mr. Olympia, despite having qualified for the 2025 Olympia by winning the 2024 Romania Muscle Fest Pro, and then, of course, at last year's Olympia 2024. Rafael achieved his highest Olympia placing ever with 8th place, that same year winning the Arnold Classic Brazil, and seemed to be rapidly improving and on track to potentially crack the top 6 at the following Olympia in 2025. But we essentially haven't seen him compete for an entire year, and he posted a YouTube video today where he talked about this, and he says that his current off-season weight is 134 kilos, which is 295.4 pounds. And he said his goal the next time he steps on stage is to be about 5 kilos or 11 pounds heavier than the last time that he stepped on stage. Now, he talked a little bit in this video about some health issues that he had that were setting him back. I guess he had some gastrointestinal issues, and that was one of the reasons why he kind of sat out this year, because he took the recovery for that process very seriously. And he says that this year he's back to 100%. He's back on track. He's showing these physique updates. He's going to compete again, qualify again, and he says in 2026 he's going to prove that he's the best Brazilian bodybuilder in the world. And I think when you look at Rafael's physique, you look at the size that he seemed to have put on even despite this health issue. And then, like I said, going back to his contest placings, when you think about like the 2024 Arnold, Ohio, Rafael was in the top 3 there. And first you had Hadi in second, and you had Samson in second. And he was in the top 3 with those two guys and beating everybody else in that lineup, including John De La Rosa, James Hollingshead, Akeem Williams, Antoine Vaillant, Justin Rodriguez, Horse MD. He did really well. And I think that bodybuilding has kind of such a short memory when it comes to, you know, these bodybuilders that are doing well right now. We're thinking about these recent shows. We're thinking about 2025, and I think about bodybuilders that we did not get to see compete this year that I think would have been a really big factor at this year's Olympia. Rafael, to me, is at the top of that list, and I feel like people forget that trajectory that he was on in 2024. He was winning big shows. He had his best Olympia placing ever. He was in top 3s with Hadi and Samson. And then he just kind of disappeared for over a year. So it makes me excited to see that he says he's back to training to 100%. He's almost 300 pounds off-season shape. He's looking to be his biggest version ever on stage, increasing by 11 pounds. I think he's going to be a big factor in 2025. And you know, we've got all these exciting things, these guys that we're looking at like Andrew Jacked and Martin Fitzwater. Good Vito had a crazy Olympia showing. Crizzo seems to be back to where, you know, the hype is starting to get behind him again. But when you really look back, I mean, look back at the 2024 Olympia where he was his highest placing ever, 8th place. And you look at the aesthetics that he brought to open bodybuilding, you look at the condition and the improvements that he had even in 2024, and you imagine this physique with maybe 10 more pounds of muscle in this type of condition or better. I think he's going to be right back in the mix this year and surprise a lot of people because he's been out of the conversation for so long. And I think in 2026, you're probably going to start to really see that changing of the guard that we've been talking about for a while as we're kind of ushering in a new era of bodybuilding and who's on top. I think Rafael can be one of those guys, but I think you're going to see guys like Good Vito really move into that conversation. I think you're going to see Andrew Jacked probably win his first ever Arnold Classic and probably improve upon last year's Olympia placing of top 3. And maybe you do start to see some of those names that we've been so used to talking about over the last 3 to 5 years. Maybe Nick Walkers or Samson Dowdas. Maybe we start to replace those names with new names as they maybe move down in placings and new guys move up into where they were. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we currently have a Brazilian classic physique Mr. Olympia champion in Ramon Dino. Could we ever see a Brazilian open bodybuilder like Rafael Brandao move up into the first place spot at the Olympia? And then, you know, you also got to consider, even though technically, as far as heritage goes, Good Vito isn't from Brazil, but he's been training and working and living exclusively from Brazil. And Derek Lunsford is working with a Brazilian trainer. I mean, they're really cranking out some superstars over there. And I think Rafael is kind of going to be the leader of that pack this year if he comes correct. Now, next up in the news, Martin Fitzwater reveals his 2026 competitive season plans. And I would say that arguably Martin has been one of the most impressive and consistent bodybuilders of the last year, including the Prague Pro victory, which I think his look in Prague was one of the best bodybuilding looks that we've seen all year in terms of somebody that peaked perfectly, in terms of crisp, grainy, insane fullness, just head to toe, nailed every aspect of the look that he brought to Prague. Great look at the Olympia, and then improved upon that. I'd say it looked 20% sharper than the Olympia. He looked even better than a really good Olympia look. And he says that he has applied for both the Arnold Classic, Ohio, and UK, and I'm sure he's going to get accepted to and invited to both. And we've talked already a lot about Andrew Jacked. Is this going to be his Arnold? Martin Fitzwater, though, this is an opportunity for Martin to really shift the momentum in his favor going into the 2026 Mr. Olympia. Because between those two shows, the Ohio and the UK, I believe they've already confirmed this, that the UK is going to be $250,000 for first. So between those two shows in 2 weeks' time, $1 million is up for grabs between the two Arnolds. And for somebody like Martin Fitzwater, that is a younger guy, he's a newer guy when it comes to him starting to get these high-level placings, which is really in bodybuilding the only point that you start to make, some significant money is when you move into these top 4, top 5 Olympia-level placings. That's when you really get these bigger sponsors. That's when you really get the bigger prize money, get better deals. So Martin has been kind of new to the successful aspect of pro bodybuilding, like being one of the upper echelon guys. So while it seems likely that Andrew Jacked would win the Arnold Ohio, and probably if he does the Arnold Classic UK, if Martin were able to beat Andrew, and Andrew was just top 3 at the Olympia, that in and of itself is a huge momentum shift for Martin in his favor. But the prize money is absolutely not only career-changing for somebody in Martin's position, but I think life-changing. $1 million in 2 weeks if Martin is able to win both of those shows. I think that puts him in such a better, I think probably a headspace. I think probably a lot of stress would be alleviated. I mean, Martin has said himself that he's a very emotional guy. He wears his heart on his sleeve. That shows on stage. I think $1 million going into the Olympia would give him like the ultimate weight off his shoulders. His only focus has to be the Olympia, and he has a chance at beating a top 3 Olympian at those shows. This could be a really big deal for Martin Fitzwater, who seems to rarely ever miss. And really the only time I think we saw him miss a little bit was the Pittsburgh Pro. And ever since then, I don't think we've seen him come in off. But I think Martin is certainly worth considering when you talk about changing of the guard, this era of bodybuilding. Him winning both Arnolds, which even if you think it's Andrew Jacked, he has it locked down. Martin does have a chance here. Martin is not to be counted out. We've learned that much about Martin for sure. And I'd say he's probably almost a guaranteed top 3 at either of those shows. Almost, probably a lock for top 2 at either of those shows. So he's kind of a coin flip at winning either one of them. But what does that do for the conversation and the momentum talking about Martin? Just imagine if he wins both Arnold Classics, $1 million in his pocket in 2 weeks. I think we're almost certainly talking about Martin as a top 3 Olympian at that point, if that's what happens. If Martin beats Andrew Jacked at back-to-back Arnold Classics, wins that $1 million, I don't think anybody is not talking about him as a top 3 guy at the 2026 Olympia. So I think that's a significant thing to think about when we go into the Arnold this year, which I believe so far there's not going to be any other Olympians. I'm pretty confident that Samson's not doing it. I'm still pretty confident Derek's not doing it. And Hottie's kind of a wild card. I don't think he's told anybody one way or the other if he is or isn't. But I think the 2026 Arnold Ohio is a huge opportunity for a guy like Martin. Andrew Jacked is already established. He's a fan favorite. He's a top 3 Olympian. It's definitely a big moment for him too. But if Martin can sneak in there and win those shows back-to-back, I think it's career-defining for him. Now, next up in the news, I'm looking again at the latest physique updates of Nick Walker. Again, he looks very impressive. And very similar story to Martin Fitzwater. The Arnold would be a massive opportunity for him. To be honest, I think of the three guys, Andrew, Martin, and Nick, I think Nick is probably the least likely of the three to win the Arnold and to beat those two guys. I'm not saying that I don't think it's possible. I think it's unlikely. When you consider the fact that Nick is now coaching himself and appears to be coaching himself if he does the Arnold, which, to be fair, Nick still hasn't 100% confirmed. I know that Kyle Wilkes said that him and Nick had talked about it. It seemed like Nick was very enthusiastic about it when they announced the $750,000 prize money. We're not going to know for sure until the list comes out, though, right? But the speculation right now is that Nick probably will, because he's definitely somebody that I think needs a momentum shift. And I think while it's possible for him to coach himself successfully, and I think it's possible for him to win a big show if he coaches himself, I think the odds are against him when he's doing that, because it's really the exception, not the rule. Most of the successful top guys do have a coach. Most of the guys winning shows like the Arnold or the Olympia do have a coach. There have been a few exceptions, but that's the exception, not the rule. So in that sense, the odds are stacked against him. And we just saw him, have a pretty big miss, I would say, at the Olympia. But then you look at updates like this and other recent updates that Nick has posted, and it's hard to say that Nick is not going to be back in the conversation. He is a freak. The updates are freaky, but again, going into the Olympia, I think Nick had the freakiest physique updates of almost anybody in Men's Open, and he was probably one of the bigger letdowns of the show. So Nick has been an example in 2025 of a guy that looks crazy on Instagram, looks like he could win any show he enters, and then all that really matters is when you get on stage. He has been kind of proof of that in 2025. But I'm not going to be a Nick naysayer. I think that Nick still has a shot at winning the Arnold. I do think it's possible. I just think it's unlikely. Now, the final story that I have for you guys today, Ed Kargbo. He was on the competitor list for the Japan Pro. He apparently is not competing. He's a guy that really impressed me at some of the shows he did in 2025, including the Europa Pro. But this is clearly an off-season update. He's confirmed that he's not doing the Japan Pro. So I wanted to add that kind of addendum here, that even though he was on the official competitor list for Japan, he is in fact not competing. And I believe he was also on the competitor list for either Prague or Romania, one of the two, and didn't end up competing. But I just wanted to add this latest physique update. It looks like he's fully in off-season mode. He looks impressive, but it doesn't look like we're probably going to see him compete until 2026. There's only a couple more shows for the rest of the year, and they're coming up very soon. So I don't think we're going to see Ed until 2026. But he's definitely a guy that I think should be on people's radars in 2026. But look, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys, appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power, my Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power, my secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.